cutting taxes alone is just not going to be enough to help us restore freedom and a better life in our communities. At some point, we're going to have to start cutting down the size of government itself. There's really just no other option. The point of this video is going to be to help you prepare for government downsizing so that it can actually be done where you live in the most effective way possible, because we're just not going to be able to trust our bureaucrats or politicians or the special interests who influence them to do it correctly, honestly, or effectively. They never will, and they exist today to perpetuate the current problems that we're experiencing and facing in our government, local and state and national right now. Now, before I go talk about cutting down the size of government, let me remind you to like and share and subscribe to this channel. Every time that you do that, I'm sure that it annoys a bureaucrat and a politician, and it helps our videos get a bit more visibility to others who are going to enjoy annoying bureaucrats and politicians just like you do. Now, let's get into some basic ideas that I think are worth contemplating in local government today. And let's just start with cities and county governments. And this is kind of an elementary approach to this, but I like doing this. What services do they provide that you and I really need? I mean, you absolutely would be faced with some type of anarchy or societal collapse without it. Well, the one issue that obviously comes to mind is public safety. What do we usually consider to be functions of government under public safety? Well, usually it's having some type of police force or judicial system, a court system, maybe a jail, and then baseline aspects of public safety, just kind of like that. Now, why? Well, it's because if we don't have something in place to provide an orderly and predictable application of the rule of law, then there is no rule of law at all and no reason for anybody to follow any law because there's just no enforcement. Now, that means that if I want to stop the criminals in my community, I just have to go down and hunt them down and shoot them, right? Because there's just no law enforcement in place to arrest them if I don't have a rule of law. And if I don't do that, they're going to harm and victimize my children, my retired neighbors next door. I mean, this is not hard to imagine how bad things go when you have no rule of law. So essentially, the legal system, it replaces vigilantism, which is just taking law into your own hands, and it provides consequences and theoretically reduces the criminal and violent activity in your community by putting bad guys in jail and deterring those who just might consider doing bad things because there will be consequences for that bad activity. Maybe they don't do it. Now, frankly, this is hard for local government to get right, even at this basic level, because it isn't easy. Nobody wants to live in a police state. The tendency of overreach is real. We don't want excessive use of no-knock raids for every complaint, and we want some type of civilian oversight for corruption in our judiciary, the police, and the prison system. However, while it may not be perfect, something that functions to maintain some type of law and order is a legitimate activity of local government. So, okay. Now, what would people consider a critical function of government after that? That's pretty obvious. Well, the next level really tends to be what people bring up as firefighting and maybe some type of ambulance services that are generally considered a legitimate function of government. And it doesn't have to be government. You can actually have private programs that might provide both types of services like this, but communal funding of common good actions like supporting firefighting capabilities and the ability to respond rapidly to car accidents or medical emergencies, these are largely services that fall under a legitimate range of local government services. But really, what comes next? Maybe it's roads and bridges and critical infrastructure. It's usually what people think about or consider. People want bridges that don't collapse, roads that are well maintained, and then some type of structure that supports power distribution at a minimum. Rural residents, they're used to wells and septic services on site, but for those in more urban settings, they usually expect support for things like sewer and fresh water, natural gas, basic utilities. So these are often provided by utilities, public or private, but there's a general recognition that governmental oversight can exist to ensure the public isn't being fleeced by these utility providers, or these services are provided in kind of a cost-effective and hopefully the most reliable, efficient manner possible. Now, you kind of get where I'm going here, and to some extent, this is just a basic thought exercise that helps start the discussion on how you can manage a functioning and thriving local government without all the bureaucratic bloat and waste that we witness today in our county and throughout our country. I encourage people to start looking locally because you're closer to those services, the bureaucrats, the providers, the budgets, and the outcomes. So you can actually start to find improvements, and you can make ways, at least theoretically, to reduce those costs, improve the quality, or certainly improve the quality of life where you live. But you can find ways to do most of these functions better than they're currently being provided right now in most cases. And you can't assume that just cutting taxes is going to basically improve local government. Remember, the nature of bureaucracy is to perpetuate itself, and when they are squeezed and they don't make value judgments that are going to match what you and I might desire where we live, the bureaucrats are going to fire the most capable employees first because they represent threats to their job, perhaps, and they make the rest of the employees look bad. Maybe they won't go with the best vendor because the chosen vendor gives them kickbacks and bribes their boss, or maybe makes campaign contributions to the politicians. So they often don't seek out effective solutions to the problems and challenges your community faces just because their budgets are cut, because, well, you and I are maybe trying to live our lives, maybe get the kids to the soccer game or fix the problems at work. The bureaucrats often looking for some excuse to extract more of your tax cash for their own aspirations, maybe a pay raise, maybe betting their resume for the next job, or other goals that just don't align with the community. Now, often sorting this out is hard to do from the outside. It's easier with transparency, maybe using records requests or reviewing budgets over years. It really does help. However, activists holding government accountable, they face the real problem, which is a distributed costs, concentrated benefits dilemma. When I say that, what I mean is the benefits to the bureaucrat are everything to them, so they will literally do anything to get that tax increase or budget raise. I mean, they literally will do anything. They'll lie, they'll falsify records, studies, and they'll bribe allies. The distributed costs to the average citizen, including the activist, it totals maybe a few cups of coffee a month in many cases. So the bureaucrat, they can simply make it so painful, time-consuming, frustrating, and such high drama to fix the problems, to make the activist or the good government community member just go away in frustration. It's easy. So the activists figure they just don't want to do the work for their community and expend all the drama, time, and energy and money to fix something that won't personally save them enough to justify the effort involved. Now, I see this challenge every day, and I discuss it with many people around the state all the time, especially those trying to reform government. But nevertheless, as government displays its increasing incompetence, waste, and corruption in bolder and more obvious ways every day, the communal frustration and the general recognition that something must be done to fix the problem inevitably grows. And we all tend to recognize that something must be done, right? Or to better paraphrase, I hear this all the time, somebody needs to do something. And of course, they want somebody else to do it to fix it. It isn't easy, and everyone is going to try to be a free rider on the exhaustive work of maybe a few hardy souls who actually do want to fix the problem. And this becomes even more pronounced at the state level of government, where entire agencies could literally disappear tomorrow, and most people really wouldn't notice or care. Yet even when times are tough, these agencies exert great energy into basically justifying their existence and maintaining the bloat of their budget, regardless of whether it makes sense or it's good for the people of the state. However, reform at some point is going to be inevitable. I think it's because of the financial drama coming down the pike, and I believe it's in our best interest to be prepared to implement some type of practical and essential downsizing of government while still maintaining the critical and necessary functions of government that we need to enjoy for a prosperous and healthy society moving forward. I mean, who really studies what this means and how it would work? Well, the answer is I am unaware of any organization that does this on any type of practical level. However, it's worth doing so, I think, right now, because when times do get tough, we will want to be able to come out of the other side of a financial downturn or fiscal collapse with a functioning city or county, or at least be an earlier local government to recover first for the benefits of our family and our community who live here. So if you want to engage in this process where you live, start to educate yourself on what your local city and county governments do. And this really should include an understanding of how they spend their money, where it goes now and who gets it, what services they claim to provide and the resources they use to provide those same services. How many employees do they actually use right now? And what are their job descriptions? Maybe what other resources do they have to use? And how is it tracked or conserved? What are the metrics of success that they use to determine if they're actually doing their job? Do they even have measurable metrics? Some don't. Do they exist to justify their existence, or do they really provide clear value to the community? All of these represent knowledge that is hard-won and worth having, and if you can share this widely with others, when a time to reorganize and streamline the services and inevitably happens in the future, you've actually made a lot more progress towards being prepared than somebody would after kind of a crisis situation. Many times, the central planning departments of your local government, for example, represent great opportunities to save resources, not just on the waste of taxpayer dollars that they currently do, but on the typically abusive nature of the policies that they enforce, really in an effort to increase the cost of housing, for example, or running a local business maybe, or operating a local farm. Harmful bureaucratic destruction of property rights and a healthy society, these are hallmarks of an abuse of local government, and destructive departments like this can be greatly downsized, reduced, or even eliminated. And it isn't just about saving the taxpayer dollars, but it's also about freeing people to live their lives without the pointless bureaucratic abuse that provides just no value to the community. Now, if you want to engage the state level, where the waste and the fat exist basically far more extensively, then this takes a bit more research and a lot more planning. I've stated many times on past videos that while I would never want to be governor, I actually would love to work for somebody who was governor with the clear task of wisely downsizing the size of the state, and therefore the costs and intrusiveness of a state that already squanders a lot of tax dollars and life energy on just nothing productive. For example, if the state downsized the entire Puget Sound Partnership Agency, nobody would care or notice, and the tens of millions of dollars wasted on that agency could definitely be saved. Another example would be to eliminate the Evergreen State College and repurpose the campus to something productive, like a large drug treatment and detox facility for all the homeless drug addicts living on the street today. They already have housing, covered indoor plumbing, in gyms, dining hall facilities, and classrooms for helping to train people to get back to a productive life. I mean, this would have the double benefit of repurposing a facility largely wasted currently, and then reduce the number of uneducated and unprepared students currently going into debt for life for worthless degrees that exist mostly just to justify a bloated bureaucratic administrative organization that really serves mainly as a mockery of higher education and a place for failing politicians to retire while padding their pensions. Just a couple of examples. Now, the more that I've studied state agencies over the years, the more confident I am that we could easily make 20-25% cut in budget cuts without the general public even noticing that the cuts happened. I mean, in some cases, our state could basically clearly begin to improve the quality of life just by not funding abusive agencies that are looking for ways to hurt people and benefit special interests, especially their own. After that initial cost savings, though, it starts to become more challenging because you would have to start changing rules and legislation to both streamline the requirements but also comply with mandatory legal requirements that they're probably operating under. One approach would be to require the state legislature to actually start approving or rejecting agency rules before they can be enacted. And right now, too much legislation is essentially outsourced to agencies who have every incentive to bloat their power and budget by kind of creeping their mandates and actions more and more every day. And by forcing the legislature to review and presumably reject some of the agency-generated rules, we could start to downsize the size and intrusiveness of the state agencies as regular policy moving forward. This all takes work and takes studying, and it takes subject matter experts in each agency rethinking how the agency is currently organized, structured, and operating. Most of them operate at very low levels of competency, low motivation for efficiency, and highly protective of their turf, with really no thought at all for the taxpayers or the people like you and I who are supposed to be served by them. If we were able to actually have a new governor in our state, a Republican governor, for example, one of the first most critical steps that he'd have to take would be to fire immediately all the heads of the agencies, probably 2 or 3 layers deep into the management of these same agencies. And the reason for this is because the hyper-partisan nature of these agencies, particularly in recent years, has just tended to ensure that politics has greatly influenced the advancement and positions held by almost everyone in upper management. I mean, it's just cemented there. And as we witnessed in Washington, D.C. at the federal level, most of these upper management types would be doing everything in their power to undermine any new change of government, and they are not some independent branch of bureaucratic functionaries anymore. Instead, they'd be willfully and with malice attempting to sabotage or slow walk any reforms that might be implemented. So a new governor would be required to downsize them all just to prove that he's serious and to protect any type of reform efforts that they might want to implement. A new governor would not have to replace everyone either. I mean, many of these agency directors and upper management, they won't be missed, and you're going to rapidly discover you actually don't need that many in the first place. Streamlining the bloated bureaucracy could actually start right there with just fewer people at this level to manage, and then kind of flattening the administrative structure at the same time. It would save quite a bit of money. But again, this takes research time and energy to study just how many of these agencies, how they function, really. Now, I've discussed these topics for years with people who work in most state agencies, And each one really has a different set of circumstances which would support consolidation or merging, elimination, or separation, really depending on the value they provide to the people, the costs that they represent, the support structure, or just other very practical considerations. But there should be some type of plan for forming right now out there to do this regardless. At some point in time, government does change and political organizations end up falling. Our state has long been mismanaged for decades by one tired party with no concept of reform or even recognition that government can be reformed. However, that should be no obstacle for those of us who are interested in how government operates and for those of us who care about liberty and freedom and how to fix the problems that we witness in government today. We should use the knowledge and the research that we have to be able to provide somebody at some point in time, hopefully in the near future, the outline, at least the basic outline on how to fix these things. Really, this is very wonkish stuff. It isn't as exciting as helping a candidate in their quest to win an election. It isn't as tedious as filing a lawsuit in a corrupted court system. And it isn't as simple as complaining on Facebook about the stupidity of government. But I believe that it's worthwhile to start this effort now, because I suspect change will come when we least expect it. And if we can be better prepared for that time, it won't be a complete wasted effort. Now, obviously, to do this, it takes time, research, interests, and a willingness to show up and discuss these subjects with other interested people just like you and I, who are basically willing to show up as well, plan, and then prepare for the future. The more we know and critique our own plans, the more likely we can have better ones for when that day inevitably comes. Until then, however, we must show up now, because the future inevitably belongs to those who show up.